we go. Hi. So we've all had the experience where, with the best of all intentions, maybe we're out exercising, we trip and hurt ourselves, we turn our ankle, and ow, something really hurts. And I'm hoping that as we go through this whole talk today, you might have a different way of handling that ow than might be conventionally recommended. Not that I would ever accuse all of you of following conventional recommendations ever. But what we're talking about today is not so much that occurrence as, nice slide, this occurrence, namely that for some reason, for nothing that you can completely understand or seem to have caused, you didn't fall down and hurt all these joints, but something hurts all over. Your muscles hurt, your joints hurt, hurts when you get out of bed in the morning. You know, maybe you're all just learning about this esoterically. I hope it's not happened to you, but I would have to say, speaking for myself, that I go through periods of time where I feel like, have I just suddenly aged? Why is everything hard getting out of bed in the morning? And so this talk is geared toward that question. A very common response, if you talk to your doctor about this, is that, you know, you're not getting any younger, something that you're just going to have to put up with. But I would say I take a completely different approach, which is that there's actually something amiss in your body that we would loosely consider some kind of dis-ease, in kind of that old-fashioned sense of dis-ease rather than disease. And it might be an autoimmune condition, or it might be a degenerative condition, but the element that they all have in common is the presence of inflammation. Inflammation comes in very handy, I'm going to try to convince you, if you actually just sprained your ankle this morning, but it doesn't come in handy when you've got inflammation everywhere and you're trying to get out of bed in the morning. So what to do about inflammation, how to learn to embrace it where we want it to work and not let it go crazy. And we do know, if you've been following any of the news about coronaviruses, that that's actually one of the elements of coronavirus at its worst, which is that inflammation kind of runs amok. So what we really want to do is not get it. We know that it's highly contagious, much more so than the regular flu, but less so than measles on the good side. Our risk factors really matter. You might have just seen in the news of a couple of, you know, they always talk about when you have a 100-year-old person who survived both the Spanish flu in 1918 and now has survived this flu. I think anytime they show pictures of those people, they are not overweight and they've got a smile on their face. So their risk factors matter, although they are not completely determinant. And then, you know, the question in everybody's mind right now is, if you get it once, are you immune? And I would say my guess at this point is going to be that it comes out that you are immune, but only for a few years. So this question of whether or not we're all going to take this brilliant vaccine when it's available is a real question. So we're doing our best to reduce contagion, and these are not comfortable to wear. They do not protect. My wearing a mask does not protect me. It protects you. And I'm hoping that the more of us that wear masks, the more of you will be wearing one also, or you, the general public, and not spreading their contagion that way. Because this is, you know, better than putting your hand or your elbow over your mouth when you cough or sneeze. And even just loudly talking now as I am, I could be, if I had the virus, I could be spreading it across the table. So we can reduce contagion. We can improve our own health. And I put reduce contagion there twice intentionally. So the proper social distancing really matters. We're going to have an office meeting after this Zoom meeting, and we're going to either decide to come into my big office and sit in 3 respective corners, or go outside and be far enough apart. We can stay alert, but some of this is going to be crossing our fingers that Southern Oregon, if you are local, stays as healthy as it's been. But even should we get sick, the health and resilience of your immune system will help you. So I am just, in fact, reading what's on the screen, but it really matters. And everything that we're going to talk about today, you could apply to chronic pain and inflammation, the health of your immune system, or as one patient wrote me in a suggestive email this morning, all really good interventions to help reduce stress. So when we think about the interaction between our immune systems and pain, conventional medicine has gotten quite sophisticated at being able to analyze and diagnose the way in which your immune system might be either attacking itself or sleeping on the job. And what conventional medicine, of course, always tries to come up with as a response to that situation is a medication that either distracts it from going awry and overreacting to something that's internal, or to distract it from what it is doing and trying to get it to pay attention to what it should be doing. And that's a conventional medicine approach. Whereas really looking at root cause medicine, which might be called functional medicine, yes, we agree your immune system has gone awry, but you know, there's actually a reason for that. That doesn't just happen. It may happen to some extent as you're getting older or with repeated injury or something like that. But for the people, most people dealing with chronic pain, they can't say it's because XYZ happened. It just seems to have started going south, and there is a reason for that. But we have to look for it if we want to identify it. Identifying it can be a little bit tricky, because while the overview of this is simple, either your immune system's pissed off about something or your immune system lacks something it needs. That's pretty simple. Okay, I sort of get that. Either my immune system's pissed off because I'm smoking and so my lungs are inflamed, or my immune system lacks something it needs, vitamin D, and so I'm more susceptible to the flu going around. That's great. How do I find out what it is? That's the secret, because the devil's really in the details. And if you want to actually identify what it is, we need to look for immune irritants, which can be acute, like the woman in the first slide who injured her wrist. It can be something you breathe, and that could be mold because you've got mold damage in your house, or it could be spring, hay fever pollens that are irritating your immune system. You know, when you eat something, when's the last time you had food poisoning? I very clearly remember those delicious raw oysters that gave me norovirus. It's not exactly the same thing as food poisoning as spoiled food, but you know, you remember when you've eaten something that's bad for you. And of course, when you get something that's infectious, your body responds to it with acute inflammation. And in all those cases, well, maybe not hay fever, that inflammation is serving you. If you have inflammation around a sprained ankle, it keeps you from re-injuring it. If you have inflammation around a strep throat, that is your immune system going and trying and taking out the invaders that are causing the problem. I, in general, like to let that acute inflammation run its course as much as possible. It's the chronic inflammation that is problematic because it arises from ongoing insults to the immune system, and it can be ongoing stress injuries. So I was talking with somebody today about the fact that I'm considering a knee replacement this summer. And did I hurt my knee? No, but I had really bad running form when I spent decades running on the streets, not such a good idea, and hills in California. That was an ongoing event. Ongoing inhaled events can lead to chronic inflammation, and this is where cigarette smoking or smoke that firefighters are exposed to, mold living in a moldy house, or toxic fumes. If you work in a industry of some sort, that machine shops are notorious for seeming kind of pretty pedestrian. You go in and out of a machine shop, no big deal, but some of the solvents they use to clean can be toxic. These ongoing inhalants, and literally there are ongoing poisons. And I put foods down there with all seriousness. I'm going to spend some real time talking about that, because what's good food at one time in your life, or to the person sitting on your left, may not be good food for you. Eating the wrong food that is poison to your system can be a significant source of chronic inflammation and can make all the difference in the world if you can identify it and set it aside. Ongoing infections. We're very aware now, particularly in brain health, that gum infections play a significant role. Our immune system, and we talked about this in one of our public presentations here, are very vital when we're young. You can give a 5-year-old 3 weeks of antibiotics, and within a month or two, their entire probiotic microbiome will be back to what it was before they took the antibiotic. You give an older person 3 days of an antibiotic, I'll put myself in that ballpark, somebody in their 70s, and it might be months or never before my immune system returns to its normal, healthy microbiome. And that matters in everywhere in the gut, from the mouth. This is the microbiome that has clearly identified and named bacteria that are not good for the brain, that cause the brain to have a leaky barrier and cause you to be a lot more vulnerable to all these other things that are on the screen going wrong with you. And it could be an infection, something that is actually more bloodborne, like Lyme disease, or some of the other tick-borne illnesses. Oh my God, that's a lot. That doesn't really sound good. How do we figure it out? Have you ever seen me wear a white coat? I actually don't have one anymore, but I've spent a lot of years wearing a white coat. And it's so helpful to people just to talk to them, to ask them where they have worked, where they have lived. Anyone that's lived in the tropics or the more rainy Northwest, I assume has been exposed to mold. Not everybody suffers from that. A lot of people just clean it up and get rid of it. But what are your exposures to the things that were on the previous slide that could cause chronic inflammation? There are a lot of blood tests that we can run. Most of these are covered by insurance. The Lyme disease test is tricky unless you're on Medicare. Medicare covers the Lyme disease test. That's great. And then we look a little harder. If I could do only one test from this whole page, I'd probably do a stool test to see how healthy your gut is. It also tells me about your digestion and your ability to absorb nutrients. But I'm interested in much more of that. What toxins have you been exposed to? How many are in or out of your system? If you were born before 1970, how many of you out there were born before 1970? You've lived or spent time in buildings with lead pipes. How's your lead level? That's a routine blood test. You can just do a whole blood lead level. Try and say that quickly 3 times, can't do it. And anything over 3 is concerning, and anything 5 and over is definitely toxic. That's about the same range of toxicity for mercury. I was just speaking to a patient this morning who I said, oh my God, your mercury level's gone from 2 up to 6. It's toxic at that level. And he's eating salmon 4 or 5 times a week, and we pursued that a little further. 2 or 3 times a week, it's wild caught salmon that he buys at the grocery store and they cook at home. And 2 or 3 times a week, he's out for lunch somewhere where they throw salmon on your salad for an extra few dollars. And I know that salmon is not wild-caught Pacific salmon. It's not an efficient way to run a restaurant if you're only looking at the bottom line. Wild-caught salmon's more expensive, but salmon that is not more expensive is either caught in the Atlantic or it's farmed, and that's going to be higher in various toxins, of which mercury is the most famous representative, but there are others. So I want to know what your lead level and what your mercury level are, and simple blood tests that can be done by anybody. Well, let's just say, what about tests that my doctor might have already ordered? These are good clues in your regular blood test that maybe something inflammatory is going on that everything else we're going to talk about could address. We want to know that your white blood count is normal, neither too high, which is I rarely see except when people are sick, or too low, meaning it's been overworking somewhere else and now it's not up to whatever task you might throw in its direction. We look for a chemistry panel that looks at, in general at your liver function. And that first line, the AST and the ALT, are two liver enzymes, and a really healthy person, their numbers will be in the teens or the low 20s. The next line is about kidney function, and I can't tell you how many people have mildly compromised kidney function, and the most common toxin that causes that is too common a reliance on the category of drugs called NSAIDs. So ibuprofen, naproxen sodium, Aleve, Advil, compromise your kidney function. And then that leads to just in general poorer clearance of other toxins from your body. You want your vitamin D level between 40 and 70. HSCRP is a really common marker for inflammation that doctors frequently order. And if you look at the actual lab page, it'll tell you that anything above 3 is abnormal. And I'll say that is really true, but anything above 1 is not optimal. So you want to see your HSCRP less than 1. You want your iron level between 50 and 100. High iron can cause inflammation, and high iron can be the result of inflammation. So somebody with high iron needs more tests to sort that out. But if you have high iron just because you absorb it really well, you're a man, so you don't have a menstrual period, or you're a menopausal woman and your iron levels are just accumulating, that can be inflammatory in and of its own right. Giving blood is a really easy way and generous way to relieve high iron levels. And you want your thyroid stimulating hormone in the medium level range of what's normal. So normal can go below 1.5 and above 2.5, but we're not just looking at normal here, we're looking at optimal. There is another way, and it really can just start with diet and lifestyle. So we're going to go over this part of it today because it's pretty easy to think that we're living a really healthy lifestyle and say, oh, you know, I do live a healthy lifestyle, but I haven't tried that. And sometimes that, addressing that can make a big influence in what might be chronic pain for you. So the first and obvious one is eat real food. And in the center of the slide, you see somebody is eating some salmon, and I hope that's wild-caught Pacific salmon. If you live locally, the co-op, and I'm not sure about the other stores, but in general, our salmon is Pacific, and it should be identified whether it's farmed or wild-caught. If you're not somebody living locally and you're not sure of the sourcing in your local market, you can always ask them. It might be good. And there are a couple seafood companies that you can buy it online. Vital Choice has been around for decades, and they have great wild salmon. And I think they've had quite a run during this economic and home shutdown period. Another one I've just learned about, I went to Sitka, Alaska last summer, and we did see a big fishery there. And now their ads have popped up, and I think Sitka salmon would be another source of good salmon I would rely on. In the upper corner of the screen, more bright, colorful vegetables, and those all serve a good purpose. Even the fruits serve a purpose. And in the bottom part of the right side of the screen, of course, the protein foods. And you notice I have red question marks over the cheese and over the eggs, two of my favorite parts of the slide, but there is a question, and this is a question to address. And dairy is the real way to introduce it, because dairy allergy with egg allergy is very common. There's two ways you might think you have a problem with dairy, and a lot of people think they have lactose intolerance, so they can't drink milk anymore because they're older and they don't digest it anymore, but they're fine with cheese and yogurt. Maybe. It's really hard to identify a food as allergic if you have some of it every day or several times a week for decades. Your body could be mad about those cheese hors d'oeuvres, but it is just really tired of complaining. Your body could be really tired of those eggs you're eating. That picture in the lower right-hand corner is some of the most common allergenic foods. Eggs, dairy, gluten, that nice loaf of bread, really common sources of allergy and inflammation. Beans, tree nuts, berries, tomatoes, the nightshade family, even citrus. See that lemon in that picture? Citrus can be allergic for some people. So this is an important slide to look at and consider. If you have chronic inflammation, you might say, oh, I've been off gluten forever. I don't think it's my diet. But you know what? I do eat fish. Well, fish can be problematic in a couple different ways, but you'll never know if a food that you eat frequently is causing you allergies until you take it out for a period of time and then reintroduce it heavily. So dairy. You really like dairy, all you really have is yogurt a couple times a week, maybe cheese a few times a week. Take it out completely, no milk, no cream in your coffee, and then 6 weeks later, have a lot of it. And don't have regular milk, because of course that has lactose in it. It's harder to digest. And if you're uncertain, unlike all the other foods in the picture in the lower right-hand corner, dairy does have a little workaround for allergy. If you think, well, it really might be dairy, but I'm not sure. I took it out for 6 weeks. I reintroduced it. It's not really clear. I think I'm reacting to it a little bit, but not a lot. You have two choices. Okay, you did that one, tried no dairy for a month. It's not so clear. But your second choice is goat dairy. And goat dairy doesn't taste or smell goaty like it used to. And if it does to you, you're more sensitive than I am. Congratulations, that's great. There is now a cow alternative that's as non or hypoallergenic as goat milk, and that's called A2 milk. If you do live locally, the co-op has milk, cream, yogurt, maybe sour cream, all made from A2 milk. And that's a less allergenic protein, and it's the protein in the milk that causes allergies. So if you're uncertain about whether you're sensitive to dairy or not, find a good goat dairy source or A2 dairy. What's missing from the food that we recommend people talk about, that people eat, that we talk about people should be eating one way? These are the things that are, of course, notably absent, and this is not surprising, right? Like, okay, all those sweets are great, but sugar is actually quite inflammatory in a variety of mechanisms. It's not a bad idea to take a period of time where you either take a break from sugar or really minimize it down. Have sugar once a week. And most of these sugars have all the other foods that I'm suggesting you take out anyway. So also absent, right? Grains, we talked about that. One of my patients, I don't know if you're watching today, did confess to me in between two of her cholesterol tests that she had relied quite a bit on French fries. And I love a good French fry. I don't falter for that. I do appreciate that she figured it out, that maybe that was the difference in some of her blood tests. The problem with French fries and those Kentucky Fried Chicken pieces of whatever they are on the bottom of the screen is that those are food items that were cooked in bad oil, and that's any vegetable oil. And if you know where I'm going, even the one on the right-hand side of the screen, which looks so healthy, but those deep fried foods were cooked in vegetable oil. They were better. We were better off 50 years ago, and they were cooked in lard. Lard is very stable. You can heat it, let it cool off overnight, heat it again, use it again. It's kind of the same the next day as it was the day before. Vegetable oil, which is thought to be more healthy, when it's reheated over and over again, damage occurs to the fragile fatty molecules, and that is very inflammatory. So it's bad for your lipid panel, it's bad for your inflammation, deep fried food or vegetable oil. And even in the picture on the right, the darling of kind of the American Medical Association, canola oil. Canola oil looks on paper like it has a pretty good resume, but it's very rare that it's not completely cold pressed, which is the only way it should be handled. And it's still a polyunsaturated oil, so even getting overheated in your car on the way home makes it a vulnerable oil. Stick with the oils. I don't think I have a slide for that, but avocado oil, olive oil, butter, animal fat rendered and saved, and for some people, coconut oil. This is a really wonderful tool when you're thinking about the nutrition strategies to deal with inflammation. If you take a dog to the vet because the dog's not feeling well and something's going on, not only will the vet ask you what you're feeding your dog, unlike perhaps some physician who might say, diet doesn't influence your ulcerative colitis. It doesn't matter what you eat. Anyway, your vet will not only ask you what you've been feeding your dog, but they suggest a couple things. Gee, why don't you just not feed your dog for a day or two and let's see if this clears up. They will also suggest that you not have a bowl of kibble out all the time for the dog to eat from. Your dog eats a meal in the morning and a meal in the evening, dog or cat, or maybe person. And then there's a good part of the day. And for humans, it's really great that it's overnight that you don't eat. And you certainly all heard me harp on that. And I bet you all could answer for me how many hours a night you do an overnight fast. And that's great. And you are doing a favor to your immune system and any potential out of control inflammation in your body when you do that. This is not an austere diet. There are good reasons to enjoy what's on this slide. And if you haven't been to a cacao factory, farm recently, you may not recognize those chocolate beans in the burlap bag. I'm only relying on my photo provider who says those are chocolate beans because I've never been to a cacao factory. But chocolate is an amazing element, a gift from the gods in multiple ways. I'm not talking about chocolate bars, although high percentage dark chocolate bars, 88, 90, 95, and 100, I would all count as high percentage dark chocolate bars. Dark chocolate is totally a gift of the gods through the cocoa powder itself, and there's some cocoa on the lower part of the screen. It has amazing abilities that redress problems in various parts of the body. You eat it, it goes through your gut. It is actually a prebiotic. So celery is a prebiotic, onions are a prebiotic, dark chocolate is a prebiotic. It helps the creation of fermentation in your gut that's advantageous to the health of your general body and particularly to your brain. There's an Alzheimer's prevention and treatment program based out of Cornell Weill Medical College. And it's much less in depth than what we normally do here, but something that we are going to start including, because I realize they include it in all their protocols. They put all their patients on some form of cocoa, some form of dark chocolate. And if you don't like cocoa, I think you can take it as a pill, but really what a waste, you know? So some form of dark chocolate. My favorite chocolate source is the website called barandcocoa.com. And if you're ever in my office when I have 100% cocoa chocolate bar, I bet you'll be surprised that you like it. And of course, everybody's darling, dark colored berries. Ideally, those blueberries should be wild blueberries. And you can see from this picture, they're half the size of a raspberry. They're not equal to the size of a raspberry. That means they have less white matter inside and more purple. These are fruits that are colored all the way through. And with the cocoa, they all have a substance called polyphenols, which are wonderful anti-inflammatories and food in their own right for our brain and bodies. And yes, you should enjoy yourself, just have fun with what you eat. If food category avoidances become problematic for you, you need to figure out some way to throw everything up in the air and have it come down again, and some way to make yourself a lettuce hat. Exercise is really important for inflammation. And so you can exercise vigorously, as my blonde daughter, Anna, is leading the runner in that left-hand picture, or somebody doing some heavy weightlifting in a gym. You can do gentle exercise as well, whether it's going for a long walk in the woods, and that's me on the right in my single rowing shell, taking a nice relaxed row around the lake. Both kinds of exercise have a benefit. And we can get more specific and really just try and find, there are many kinds of exercise, but finding something that you can do vigorously and something that you can do relaxed is a great goal that you're looking for with exercise. It's important to recover from what you do. And recovery comes in two forms. It comes as daytime recovery, and that can just be lying in the hammock and sitting back. It can be gazing out the window at a view. I will not fault people who are binging out on Netflix during the quarantine, but that's not exactly recovery. There should be some downtime. The one qualifier I'd make about a really valuable source of stress recovery that is way more active than this is that exploring the possibility of being helpful to other people. So what are you doing? There's lots of things you're doing to try and keep yourself healthy during this quarantine and now gentle opening that we're having kind of throughout the country. When you wear a mask, you're helping other people because it's really protecting them from you. What else can you do? A lot of people have made up little cottage industries, sewing masks. You may have an older neighbor, friend, or relative that you can do a little shopping for. That's a wonderful stress recovery, very active endeavor that I would applaud, and can testify that when we do things like that, we all feel a little bit better. So that's more of an emotional recovery. This person's taking a physical recovery, and at the end of the slides, we're going to do one of my favorite little mental recovery options. We talked about sleep. Sleep is really important for recovery, and ideally it's dusk to dawn or something like that. Something regular in a dark room that has no electronics and doesn't really have Wi-Fi signals bouncing in and out of the room all night. So if you use your phone for something while you go to sleep, I hope you put it on airplane mode while you're sleeping at night, and that means you can't be recharging it in the bedroom. The whole concept of the safety or dangers of electromagnetic fields is complex and really scientifically debated. We're going to be doing more of that as 5G comes to our country as a whole. I'm not sure what I think of that. But one thing I do know is that proximity to sending and receiving electromagnetic transmissions interferes with sleep quality. So charging your phone near your bed, not a good idea. Having your phone there so you're receiving emails all night, not a good idea. Having your phone in the next room with the speaker turned up high so you can hear your loved ones calling you in the middle of the night, that's great. I don't think some people do benefit from turning off their Wi-Fi to their whole house for sleeping at night. If you're not sleeping well at night, as peacefully as this woman here, she should really be in a dark room though, sleeping outside at night. If you have any sleep troubles, sleeping outside, sleeping under an open skylight or an open window so you get moonlight can actually disrupt sleep. Anyway, if you're not sleeping as peacefully as she is, turn off your Wi-Fi at night. See how that works for you. Okay, so you've seen this before. We show this in a lot of our presentations. And, but what I'm going to invite you to do is, you may like this, but you only do this when we have a presentation. How else do you choose to recover in a meditative way going about your day? I have half a dozen different meditation apps that I rotate through from time to time. And I was listening to one the other night before bed, and I thought, I want to share this little bit of audio with my friends on Zoom on Wednesday. So as you hear Sam Harris start to speak, I invite you to close your eyes and stop watching the nice little synchronous. And then when you hear my voice, you can open your eyes back up again. But here's Sam Harris talking to us on the Waking Up meditation app that has many free items, or you can subscribe. He's going to start talking in just a minute. Seat yourself comfortably in readiness.
In this last minute, follow the breath as closely as you can. You might make a mental note of in and out, or count each inhalation and exhalation. Just a very soft mental note that covers the duration of each breath. And simply receive the breath. Don't reach out for it or anticipate it. Just let it appear on its own.
I'm going to pause him. What he goes on to say in the last really couple minutes of this meditation is the opportunity to develop a highly refined mental and emotional skill with the practice of meditation. And that skill is something very valuable to any of us. It's the skill to develop your abilities to respond to life in general the way you respond to the breath. You notice it. You may name it. And that it enables you to have a momentary pause between the action of dropping the gallon of milk on the floor or the eggs you had just scrambled and your reaction. And you get a moment in that pause to choose your reaction. And sometimes you may like fly off the handle, but sometimes you may just say, oh, I feel really stressed and angry. But really, there's just eggs on the floor to clean up. Anyway, Sam Harris, I encourage you to check out his app, Waking Up. I want to close with my 3 favorite supplements for inflammation and for chronic pain. Vitamin D, I like it in a liquid form. I think it's better absorbed. How much should you take? As much as you need to have good labs. Typically in Southern Oregon, that's 4,000 international units a day. Really dark-skinned and older people might need a little bit more. Really young, outdoorsy people might need a little bit less. There was an experiment done once in a chronic pain clinic, and they went in and they took a seated waiting room, and they did this for a week. Everybody on the left-hand side of the waiting room got vitamin D supplementation. I think it was only 2,000 international units a day for a month. And the ones on the other side got a placebo, probably olive oil or something like that. And so there were, hundreds of people by the time they treated everybody who showed up over a week or a day. I don't remember what it was. And by the end of the month, the ones who'd been given vitamin D on top of their regular chronic pain management had significantly less pain than the people who just had their conventional chronic pain management. So great supplement, optimize your vitamin D for pain. This is true for mental, emotional, or physical pain, but I was just talking about physical. Turmeric is a very popular supplement, and it is used as a spice in India, where they use tablespoons full of it in each meal that they cook with lots of coconut milk and peppers to enhance its absorption. Unless you're going to eat that way, I think you should get turmeric made into curcumin, made into optimized curcumin. And there are 2 forms of curcumin that generate legitimate blood levels and have been studied in situations such as osteoarthritis of the knee or low back pain. And those are theracurmin or Meriva. And my instructions about taking them are going to be the same as the next one. So we'll wait to the next one. So fish is great. It's an anti-inflammatory food. And fish oil is great. It has EPA, which is an essential omega-3 fatty acid that's particularly good for the vascular system, and DHA, which is one that's particularly good for the brain. And it just has lots of smaller components in lesser quantities that are very, very anti-inflammatory. And several manufacturers, and my favorite is on the screen there, Designs for Health, have identified the most anti-inflammatory subfractions of fish oil and put them together in special pro-resolving mediators, SPMs. And what I would suggest you do with either theracurmin or SPMs, they work differently, so you could do both, should you choose to do them, is to realize, okay, it's going to be a little bit of a hit to the wallet for the first month, and to take 1 or 2 of either supplement, theracurmin or SPMs, 1 or 2 times a day. So you could be anywhere from 1 to 4 of them for the first month. And then you can go down to 1 a day for either one of them, for both of them. They both should be pretty potent at 1 a day once you've built up a level. So if I had chronic pain, wasn't sure I was going to do all those dietary things, or I thought I'd done all of them, but I still wanted some help with my pain issues while I was going through my life, these are my 3 top choices. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can be back and see who's here and see if Rachel, I see there's some questions in the chat. Oh, my clicking is very loud. I'm sorry. From Renee, is there Atlantic salmon? Yes. And is that good? No. I don't know if it's the currents in the Atlantic compared to the Pacific, or the presence of greater industrial drainage into the Atlantic. But Atlantic salmon are widely tested to be more toxic ridden and less rich in omega-3s than wild Pacific or Atlantic salmon. And Anne asked a really good question about Wi-Fi, which is, you know, if you live in town and you decide to turn off your Wi-Fi at night, what about your neighbor's Wi-Fi? And that is a real problem. The Wi-Fi signal fades markedly by distance. So I think either you could talk to a really good friend neighbor about an experiment of them turning off their Wi-Fi from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Or you could just ask them what side of the house their router is on and see if you can position yourself as far as possible from that, because the distance would be really valuable. Anybody else have any other questions? Rachel, you going to run a poll today?
I'm not going to run a poll, but I did just want to mention that, you know, Deborah, you suggested making some dietary changes for people to help with inflammation and chronic pain, and sometimes coming up with recipes or a plan, or, you know, talking through with somebody what you want to do to move forward can be really helpful. And I just wanted to let you know we have a really great nutritionist on staff named Vanessa Rodriguez, and she can be a really good person to help you implement some of these changes. And if there's something you really love to eat, potentially find a solution that maybe changes the ingredients but allows you to still eat what you want. And so I just wanted to let you know that, as well as if you wanted to purchase some of the supplements Deborah talked about, either her Dr. Deborah MD website or the Northwest Memory Center website has a little tab that says shop, and you can get all of these supplements that are generally only provided through healthcare practitioners there. So just wanted to let you guys know that.
I want to say something about our nutritionist for those of you who are local. So how Vanessa got into nutrition was working particularly with someone who had autoimmune disease, one of the major causes of chronic pain and inflammation. Even osteoarthritis, like my old lady knee arthritis and thumb arthritis, it will have an autoimmune component to it. And she became not only adept at working with autoimmune disease with people for whom it meant a big change in their diet, because they were not eating anything like the slides we looked at, been very adept at that, and then inspired and went on and became a nutritionist about that, inspired by that success. And she has had success, and she is really good about helping people find, you know, I'm pretty happy eating 3 eggs for breakfast every morning and not much else, maybe a little sauerkraut. Some people really don't, you know, they're a little more creative than I am, and they don't like eating the same thing every day. If you are on Instagram, you should follow Rachel Lee on Instagram, because she is the queen of food porn. It's incredible. She's great. I'm not going to take pictures of my breakfast, which is always just 3 eggs. Susan asked a question about chocolate. 70% isn't good enough anymore. I think 70% is a gateway drug from sugar to real chocolate. So great, if 55% is what you like, great, do 55% and then try 70%. Oh, that's not so bad. I can do 70% and then go up to 75 and then go to 80. But I really think to get less sugar, 85%, to get more benefit and less cost to your system, because remember those pictures with big sweets should have had big red X's going through them. Those are kind of prohibited, high sugar. Trader Joe's has a 100% chocolate bar that is hard for me to believe it doesn't have chocolate in it. It's not organic, so that's not ideal. I wouldn't do it all the time, but it has salt and nuts in it, and you can eat it as addictively as you would eat 70% chocolate. I guarantee you'd like it. Somebody asked specifically about the autoimmune component, and autoimmune disease, there's an article about it on drdeborahmd.com. I think it's called Autoimmune Disease. I always start with exactly what we talked about here today, diet and lifestyle. I do recommend those more in-depth labs. Someone who thinks they have autoimmune disease might have Lyme disease. It would be a shame to keep treating autoimmune disease when really, if we just got rid of the Lyme disease, that might take care of things. The other thing that we do with autoimmune disease, optimize all their nutrients and actually check them to make sure that they are optimal. We use a prescription called low dose naltrexone, and they have a website called lowdosenaltrexone.org. It's a drug that was first used decades ago. It was the first drug available to wake people up from opioid overdoses. So it was used in emergency rooms. Now they use naloxone instead. And you use it in really tiny doses, low dose naltrexone. And it blocks your opioid receptors. And if everything works according to plan, you take it at bedtime so you don't notice that your opioid feel-good receptors are blocked in the middle of the night. And your body goes, ugh, my opioid receptors are blocked. And it kind of, brushes off the naltrexone, resets the opioid receptors. So first of all, many people wake up in the morning feeling great, as if their opioid receptors have been boosted. And the other thing it does is they're sitting on some of the T cells, which are an important part of your immune system, important part of this coronavirus response is what happens to your T cells. And they can be kind of stuck and imbalanced. And if you just attend to the opioid receptor sitting on the T cell, sometimes it seems to right itself. So I don't go into the detail because I think it's a little sketchy science of trying to figure out if you have T cells of type 1 or T cells of type 2, and to see if those go back into balance. But if somebody, I would say the people I put on low dose naltrexone typically, and I've used it for autoimmune disease, depression, and insomnia, which is kind of ironic because when you first start it, sometimes it can aggravate sleep problems, but when you get used to it, it usually makes them better. And I've seen improvement in all those areas, but I frequently have seen people with kind of chronic autoimmune disease who say, I can't really tell it was doing anything. So I was going down, and this was literal, I'm going down to Los Angeles to help my son have his baby, and I ran out of it when I was down there, and oh my goodness, I'll never go off of it again, because it's kind of slowly but steadily takes down inflammation. It is a drug, in responding to Anne's question, that is not very well known outside of the functional medicine, integrative medicine, alternative medicine kind of world. And if you ask conventional doctors, they will think that you are actually taking naltrexone and not 1 to 5 milligrams of naltrexone. So it's NALTREXONE. And Rachel just wrote it out there in the chat room, and the website is lowdosenaltrexone.org.
Deborah, earlier someone, I think it was also Anne, maybe mentioned that we had linked a liver pate recipe on the newsletter. For people who are on strict paleo, can they use wine or alcohol to cook with, and what are good alternatives?
The nice thing about Vanessa's recipe, if you looked at it, is that she really encourages you to cook it until the alcohol's bubbled off. And I would say just doing that because what I want in my pate is that the sauteed onions and the butter provide all the moisture. So I don't want extra moisture from the wine. So I do cook it all off. So it does not add any alcohol. But if someone's very, very sensitive to alcohol, I would say the best substitute for it is a good vinegar. And it's amazing what a good vinegar can do to something like a stew or a soup, or I bet it would be great in liver pate. I would use a good balsamic vinegar. And balsamic vinegars are all over the map, from cheap and kind of blah and taste like they're an Italian dressing from Wendy's drive-through or something like that, to tasting so good that you kind of want more vinegar than olive oil in your salad dressing. So experiment, find a balsamic vinegar that you like. And if the alcohol doesn't cook off well enough for you. But I think, so what about if you're just on paleo? Do you even have to avoid wine? And you really don't. So people, the paleo diet, which is kind of the short version of this autoimmune diet we're talking about, it's just no grains, legumes, or dairy. You can go farther with it and do the Whole30 diet, which also takes out sugar and alcohol. And if you're doing that diet, I wouldn't even put the wine in and cook it off. I think that's kind of, you're going to decide you're going to make a wall and stay on one side of it and the alcohol is going to be in the other. I think that's great. But strictly speaking, the paleo diet does allow wine in some people's versions. For other people, they just stick to the most acceptable alcohol on the strictly paleo diet is tequila. And I've learned to appreciate tequila over the last year. But yeah, I'd substitute in cooking recipes, I'd substitute balsamic vinegar. Great. Anything else from you, Rachel? Any other questions? We are recording these sessions. Are they available on the website? They will be. And usually what Rachel does in her knowing how to handle all these things is send out links to previous talks when she sends out a newsletter. It would be nice if we had a place where they were on the website, because I keep getting spam mail that says my website needs video. And I work with a really brilliant health coach who may or may not still be on the call, who's telling me that our website needs more video. So we should at least have these videos that we can and easily do reproduce and put them on the website. So we'll figure out and let people know where they are. Great. Thanks everybody for joining us. We're going to be back in 2 weeks, and that brilliant health coach of mine I referred to will be joining me and talking about kind of strategies when you approach a topic as big as what we just talked about today. Does this mean really changing my life? Because even just like going from 70 to 85% dark chocolate is a change, and some changes are easy and some changes are hard, and you can't predict which is which. So she's going to be talking to us, helping sort those things out. And I'm not sure what I'll weigh in my piece of it, but you'll hear from me too. So thanks everybody. See you later.